Welcome to our third watercolor class. You'll need, once again, your paper and your test swatch paper, so just extra paper you can test your colors on. You also need your brushes. I have a really big one just for the wash. And you also need, I usually just use 3. So there's a flat brush, and then a really small one, and a round tipped brush. So 3 sizes, 3 different shapes. You'll need your water, of course, and you'll also need your paint and palette. And your paper towel. So those are all your supplies. Please take a picture or a screenshot if you can. Otherwise, this iPad is going away because it cannot fit. So our scenery for today is a little bit different. Last 2 weeks we did flowers, so it's going to be a little bit of a switch up. This is a architectural kind of building. I think it's in Slovakia, somewhere in Europe. So we're going to do this, take our time, and do something called an underpainting today with the watercolor. So let's get started. We will not be using a pencil. Just we're going to sketch with our watercolor. All right, so the first thing I am going to do is I'm going to create a light wash using my flat brush. So unlike last time where we covered the whole sheet in water, we're not going to do that today. We're just going to get right into the color. So the color you'll need to make first is this light orange hue, because in the image, the building we're sketching today it's orange, it's cream. So we're going to do our base coat, our underpainting in that color. So you're going to take some red and some yellow just to make this orangey red color. And add some water to dilute it. So if you take a look at the example over there, the first layer is very, very light. We're going to try and make our painting, our underpainting, as light as possible. So add a lot of water to this first color. So on our test swatch, you're going to want to get this light. Oh, it's a little too dark. I think we need some more yellow and also more water. So right now we're just mixing the colors so we can prepare it for our first layer. And mix it really nice and well. Let's test it again. And that is a pretty good color for our sketch. So with this color, I'm going to take my flat brush again and use it and try our best to just sketch the outline of the buildings. So if you have the picture, you can look at it, but if not, you can just follow me. I'm going to start with the edge of the roof of the building. So over here, it's a little too much paint. So with the orange, make sure it's not too loaded or else you might get a little dot like that. We want to make sure our line is very thin and crisp. So I'm going to start with the roof. Does not have to be accurate. Just start sketching as if you were drawing with a pencil. And if you don't have a flat brush, you can also just use a round brush. The flat brush is good for these straight edges over here. And the roof is a little bit interesting. There is a triangle that goes on the very top. The rest of the roof slopes down like this. And because this is a wash, we can fill in this area. Because later we will go in with our, once everything is dry, we will add the details. Now I'm going to draw the side of the house. There's also a building that comes from the side, a little shed. So just draw the edge of that. And here's another step that would make this more interesting. And that is you can take some blue and red. So we're making purple. Just make some purple on the side. It can be indigo as long as it's not pure green, pure blue. So something like this, add some water. I'm just going to add it to the bottom line under this roof. What we're doing is because the shadow of the roof, when it drops onto the wall, although in the picture it looks the same color, in our painting we can use some cool tones, so like blue or purple, to make the temperature of the shadow feel more realistic. Okay, I'm back to the orange and I'm going to finish off this side of the house. And there's a shadow over here as well. And for this one, you can also add just a dab of this purple blue. And if you find that there's paint that's collecting at the bottom, just take a dry brush. So dry your brush and just pick up the water little by little so it doesn't create these little harsh edges. Okay, now I'm going back with the orange and just going to finish off the shed on this side. Just really simple shape. And for the third building in the background, which is also another shed, we can just lightly hint at it. So it doesn't have to be entirely there, but if you put some paint there, it won't look so empty. And then for the road in the front, you can also sketch that in. So take some orange, and I'm going to hold my brush at a flat angle and just drag it across the bottom. I think most of you are using mixed media, so the paper is really smooth. But if you're using cold press watercolor paper, there's a more texture. So when you drag your brush across, you can kind of see the rough edges.
Are you painting? 想畫嘅，但係出咗去接你，佢而家畫咗咁多啦。
And in the picture, there were some cars, but I'm just going to not draw them today because I think the picture would look better without, if we can see the side of the fence. And there's also some shrubbery here, so we can lightly sketch that in. So essentially what you see right now is a underpainting, and an underpainting is just the underlayer. It's kind of the preparation for the actual painting. Okay, and we're just gonna let this first layer dry before we add anything else. And while we're waiting, I'm going to wash my brush and make a new color. So far we only used orange and dark blue. The next color will be an olive green. So take some green, and we're going to try and make it more yellow. If you're running out, you can always refill. But I think it is so important to have a palette or a pan where you can mix the colors when doing watercolor. Because if you don't have a pan, it's very hard to get the right colors you want. So I'm making the green so we can start working on the trees and the grass. I think I'm also going to add some red. Just a little bit. Just to tone it down. And then add some water. And the color we're going for is kind of this muted orange, not orange, lime, almost olive green. All right, and before we do any of the green stuff, we're going to go back to the building, and it should be slightly dry, but not entirely. There is a shadow that's coming on the right side of the building because of the roof. So we're going to draw that in as well. So back to the orange, I'm going to add a drop shadow. There's also a few random shadows just on the side here of the trees that we'll paint in later. So we added the shadows on this building. We also need to add some shadows on the roof, on this shed on the left side. So actually first I'm going to fill in top of the roof here because it is red in the picture and I think that's a nice color. So I'm filling that in, and then at the bottom, add a shadow for the roof from the wall. You can also add some blue. Just drop it in there. There was also a wire pull on this side, but I'm going to keep it out because I want to see the trees in the back. Okay, and now that the shadows are down, we're going to slowly move into the windows, which is the fun part. So there were 5 windows on this face of the building, and I'm going to use the flat brush, the square one. And how we're going to draw the windows is I'm just going to take any color. I'm using blue. And basically the shape you want to make is just a rectangle. Not like that. Like this. And just like that. It's just 2 rectangles. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to start my window here. So there's one rectangle, and then there's a longer one. It's a little bit wider than that, so I'm going to drag the paint out. So it's one thin one and then one large one. This is basically where the window panes are. And then just do 4 more of these. Remember, this does not have to be exactly perfect. As long as the shape is there, then anyone can tell that this is a window. And there's also 2 more at the bottom. Okay, and once we're waiting for the windows to dry, we can start moving on to the trees in the background. So this is quite an interesting way we can draw trees. I'm going to take my round brush this time. So my large round size 8 brush, and I'm going to do a wash. So just with clear water. And I'm going to add water where the trees are. So if you can't see that, I'll show you in just a second. That it's shiny just in the areas where I want the trees to be. So if you can see, that's not just one flat area. I'm leaving some of these holes in the middle. So create a wash on the other side as well. We're going to make sure it's shiny, so it's very wet. You can also bring the water down into the orange sketch. And what you're going to do is just add green and watch it just blotch into the colors or into the water that we just put down. You can also add different shades of green. So while we're doing this, we can also make new colors, but make sure there's water. Water is very, very important. You can also add some blue for the mountains in the background. You just want a lot of different colors. You can put some yellow. These trees actually go a little bit higher, so I'm going to bring the water up here just a little bit more. And if you have water collecting anywhere, just bring it down and dry your brush. This will create a nice fading effect and prevent you from getting a rough edge. Same on this side. I'm going to take my dry brush and just run it across the bottom, pick up that water, and dry it off on my towel. And down here, there's also a patch of grass. So we're going to do the same technique. Actually, not the same technique. You can just apply the green directly instead of doing a wash. The wash is good for when you want to get that leafy effect. Grass is mostly uniform. See, I'm holding the brush sideways. So when the bristles part, I get some of this texture that I really enjoy at the bottom. Okay, and now I will mix a darker green for the trees and the shrubs in the front of the house. So in this area, make sure to use a lot of water. Also take some blue and mix it with some yellow. To darken the green, you can also add some red. And the color we want is something like that. Just a little bit darker than the trees. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and do the bushes in the front. So, because some of them have flowers, I'm gonna do a stippling effect. So just take the tip of the brush and just randomly start scratching in these shrubs over here. You can also change the color to give your shrubs more variety. Just going back to my colors and adding anything that I think might make the shrubs more interesting. So you see I'm adding some red, even though tree, the leaves are green, just because it adds that variation. And then here, just let it fade. And on the grasses on this side, there's not that many flowers anymore, so we can just kind of block it in. And then bring it down to the grass in a sweeping motion. I'm now taking some yellow and I'm going to add it to the grass over here. And then on this side, we have some fences. They're appear to be quite brown, but they're just a dark color. So I'm going to take the green, put it in the blue. If you don't have a blue, just make some blue right now. And also add some red to it. We can create this kind of, that was a little too purple. Just a bluish green. Maybe a little bit more red. And I'm going to add some orange to this color. And this is just for the fence that's going along the side. So I'm taking the round brush and drawing a few lines, some of them sticking close, some of them apart, some of them lower, some of them higher, just to create that kind of farm side old fence feeling. In this space between the bushes and this shed, there is a huge stack of fire logs. So we can add that in our painting as well. And I'm just going to mix yellow with orange. I want to get a brown, just a light brown, something like this. And just do a light wash here, just for the color. So now I'm just going to wait for this green to dry. As you can see, most of this is still pretty shiny. That means I'm going to let it sit until it has completely dried. And while we're waiting for this to dry, if the trees in the background are dry for you, you may also start this step. I'm going to darken the trees in the background by adding some black to the dark green. You just want to get a pretty dark color. That should be good. So making a really dark green. And just darken up these corners. at the bottom of the tree. So I'm also going to use the dark green and paint around. There's this tiny tree that's along the house here. We're going to make it come into existence. By painting around it. And then I'm going to take some light green and fade it off to the side. So there was a tree here, but the trees in the back are darker. So I'm using the dark paint and creating the outline of it. So now we can see it. And then just bring some of this dark color naturally up to the top. So I'm just taking the round brush, dabbing it here and there. So the transition is much more natural. And then you can leave this part because this is kind of the hills and the mountains in the background. So now we can see that this tree is in front and these are the distant hills. If you really want, you can also just add a few lines. And this dark green is actually also on this side because this house, when the sunlight is coming in this way, the shadow becomes really dark on the trees, particularly in corners. So over here, so now most of the green things are done in our painting. And we're really just going to let that dry, not work too much on it. However, in the meantime, we can add the road that's on the side here. You can leave this part white if you want to, but I think that it would be a good addition. So the color that we'll be mixing for the road here is kind of a gray orange. So we're gonna take some orange from our original sketch or underpainting color. and just add some blue, some purple, some red. Eventually you want to come to this gray. That needs to be a little bit more blue. Something like that, just a warm gray. So that's the color you want for the road here. And how you're just gonna draw the road, you're just gonna do simple flat wash. I would personally darken this gray just a little bit more. So I'm going to add some black. A little bit more. Okay, so now my paper has mostly dried. As you can see, most of it is dry, except for this tree over here, which is still shiny, but that is okay. It's not like shiny, it's got this sheen to it. It's not dripping wet. So that means I'm going to get started with the details part of the painting. So we've never really drawn with a really small brush before, but we can do this today. So mostly in painting, we do big strokes, but for this class, we're going to do as if we're drawing with a pencil crayon with our paint. So we're going to mix a few colors for the building. We're going to need this brown for the roof and just a few dark colors in general, mostly just red tones. So I'm going to add turn this orange into a darker brown. So I'm going to add some red. And I think that should be pretty good. We're also going to make a very dark red brown. So take some red, add to the gray here. Since we already have it, it's convenient. Some green. And just want this dark, shadowy color. I think that should be all the colors we'll need for now. So just a darker orange, and then you'll also need a very dark brown. So just these two colors. Okay, with my larger round brush, I'm going to start with the roof. So working from the top to the bottom. How we're going to do the roof is we're just going to draw several fine lines just going across the top. And just fill in the roof. And go all the way down to the bottom. Make sure your brush is not too wet or too loaded with paint. For the bottom edge, you can just close it off with the dark brown. You can also do this with a flat brush. You can continue and just do the same for the rest of the roof. For this triangle area here, if you do have it, it is a lighter orange. So I'm going to go back and add some yellow because there's more sunlight hitting this plane. So a lighter orange will do. It's a little bit wonky, but I'm just going to draw it, drag the edge down. Using some dark brown to create that shadow edge. can actually extend the roof. Take the dark brown and just darken the areas where the shadows are the darkest. So right in this corner over here. It's also a little bit under this roof. And also under this side of the roof as well. So take some dark brown. Do the same for the shed over here, and that should be the end of this part. So I'm taking some darker orange brown, doing the same layering technique. Also going to add some darker brown to the fence. There's also some random little poles here and there, so you can add some of these details. I'm going to switch out the large brush for a the smallest brush I have, which is a size 0 round brush. As you can see, it's very, very small. I'm just going to use the same colors, but this time I'm going to go into the windows and just outline the window frame. So with my dark brown, and I'm not just boxing it in, I'm actually going where the shadows are. So the top and to the right. And below these windows, you can also add a very light wash of this orangey color. This is for the shadow of the window, which is sticking out of the house. Just at the bottom. You can barely see it. But it's also kind of like how the moisture, when they escape the house, it makes the walls look darker because of the water, the condensation that drips down the side. So we can also create that sort of effect. And just to give this house a little bit more of a character, you can also add some on the left. Gonna take the darker orange, and there are also some chimneys at the very top. So just 2 of these tiny chimneys poking out from the top. And then darken one side of the face, or one face of the chimney. Be careful not to let the edge set below the roof line. Or else the chimneys look like they're overlapping with the roof. So I'm just gonna clean up the edge. Okay, I'm going to put the small brush aside and actually go back to the shadows on the left here. So I'm going back to my flat brush and I'm going to mix a bluish green, which I already have here. If you don't have bluish green, just mix whatever green you have and add some blue to it. And you're going to create a very, very light wash. So not too much pigment. And I'm going to add some shadows just on this side. Actually going to add more blue to make this kind of a more on the blue side. I'm also going to add some red. So now I have this kind of purplish blue, and this is good for shadows on any of these things. So I'm going to add some of this color along the edge here where the shadow is. Just right on top of that original color. If you want, you can also use some water. And just slowly bring it down. This will create a backwash effect. I'm also going to add some blue up here. And add some blue on the shed as well. This helps make the orange hues pop out more. So we're just creating color contrast. Okay, now one of the last steps we're going to do is we're going to just draw in these bushes and flower shrubs in detail, which means we are going to use more pigmented paint. So I'm going back with my paint and just refilling the green because I am running out. And I'm going to make this green even darker. Well, not darker, just more saturated. So I'm going to add some green to that. Notice how it's becoming kind of thick instead of runny. We kind of want that thicker consistency. So I just added some red. Just going to keep mixing red and green until you get the right color. Still kind of see-through. So I'm going to take some blue and yellow. Hopefully this should be a little bit better. Not that much. Maybe we need some black. So black, blue, red, yellow, whatever you need to mix to make the green darker. As long as the green is still the dominant color, then you will be getting the right shade. Just want a really saturated dark brown. And there we go. That's a pretty dark color. And you can see that if we put this color over here, it would make a visual difference. All right, so my dark green is mixed. Doesn't have to be a totally runny consistency. It can be kind of pasty as well, because right now we're just drawing. And I'm going to go in with my round brush and just randomly draw in these shrubs, kind of like trees. You can also change the color as you go. If you feel like it's too dark, then you can take some lighter green and just mix it up a little bit. So still keeping that grassy brush texture. Just continue and just darken this whole area up. You can also add some blue, especially at the bottom. And leave the tops of the shrubs quite light. Just adding some green, some lighter yellowish green on the side of the road for the grass. Okay, and while we're waiting for this to dry, we can actually add a pretty important detail that we don't have just yet, and those are the clouds and the sky. So I'm going to mix a pretty clean blue. So new color, make some sky blue. All you need is just some blue. For this one, I'm going to add some red as well because the blue for me somehow is a little bit too green for the sky color that I want. So I'm going to make it just a little bit more of a purple blue by adding more of the red. And it needs to be very, very light. And the simplest thing you can do for the sky is a wash. And as you do the wash from top to bottom, leave some areas white, and those will be the clouds. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this blue color, drag it across the top. It won't be too dark. And then also, let's say I'm going to leave this area white, and also this area white. And just color the rest of the sky in. It's just simple as that. Nothing too detailed. And the sky is usually darker at the top. And that should be it for the sky. It is so faint you can barely see it, but it is. And it is definitely there. And honestly, after the sky, I don't think there's much to add. You can just continue maybe adding a few trees here and there. Otherwise, we're nearing the end. There's also one last detail we can add, which are the flowers in the bushes over here. But we really have to wait for this green to dry. Otherwise, the pink of the flowers will just be gone. So we do have to wait for this to dry. But everything else is mostly done. What else can you do at this stage? You can also maybe darken the shadows using some blue. But I quite like this without the high contrast. So the technique for the shadows is just you add some paint, dab your brush, get some clean water, and then drag the paint down using the water. And I'm just going to test this. I'm going to add a light wash of purple over the top of this roof over here and just see how it looks. I'm not really sure what it'll look like. But maybe that makes more sense. I'm not really sure. Going back in the dark green and making it a little bit lighter. Just going to add some details to the edges of the trees here. Just make these blobs look less like blobs and more like leaves. So using the very tip of my brush, I'm adding some fine details. And back here as well, there were some trees without leaves, so you can also add that as a detail. And I think I'm going to add just a few flowers so this area doesn't look too green. So I'm going to just take some red and make a pink color. Just add a few dabs of this pink color here, especially in the empty spaces. And maybe also in the not so empty spaces. It's really hard to make it not look like flowers. Sometimes it can look like a rash. Take my paper towel and just dab it to make it lighter. And I think that should be the end. So that is it for our watercolor class. And Jenny, you can stop recording. We are done.